It is exactly 6:01 and namaste. Welcome to the Eventfull Verandah today. Welcome to Gaurav Tripathi, the CEO and founder of Vayam, and he's primarily responsible for us being able to talk with each other today. Welcome to him and his teammates, and a big welcome to our robust and energetic author, Venkatesh Rangan, the author of the book, The First Republic. And it is a very historic day today. And we are happy to have Gaurav Tripathi as our chief guest while we are talking about the first Indian Republic and its principal founder, Nana Fadnavis. Balaji Janardhan Banu is the real name of Nana Fadnavis, and he was born in 1742 and lived until 1800. And why is this First Republic business? What is the real idea? Viewers, I must definitely share that today's Indian area is approximately 3 million square kilometers. And in 1772, at the time when Thoralai Madhavrao, the Peshwa, had passed away at the age of 27, the area of the Maratha Empire was 2.8 million square kilometers, hardly 10% lesser than what the Indian area is today. So it was largely a huge pan-Indian empire. A crisis of sorts was created with the death of Madhavrao. He was succeeded by his younger brother, the teenager Narayan Rao. Unfortunately, the youngster was murdered by his own uncle, Raghoba or Raghunath Rao. And, a group of people, along with the guidance of the Nyayadhish Ram Shastri, managed to step in and create a Barbai Council, and which later became the Karbari Sarkar. The day when this democratic government was created was 30th January 1774. Venkatesh Rangan has rightfully said, ours is the oldest surviving such civilization in the world. There can be no thing called, this is for the first time. Something could have happened even before. He has done enormous research on all this and painstakingly has gone through a lot of records and produced a lot of wealth of information. While we were doing this, Gauravji, a series of authors were coming in. Thanks to Chandani Srinivasan's introduction to Vayam. And while we were going through these authors, one of my friends from Madras, Rohit, he came to me through this Sringeri Math magazine, Tattvaloka, some years ago. He suggested that I interact with Venkatesh Rangan and look at his book, read it, and take it up. So I spoke to Venkatesh Rangan, ordered for the book, got it, and it was an unputdownable read. Hats off to Mr. Venkatesh Rangan. He has done a marvelous job, and his attempt has really enriched everybody. See, there is a lot of wealth that we see. Wealth is visible. But the treasure that we call as is also a form of wealth, but a treasure is not visible, right? So our first day of the declaration of the First Republic can be compared to a treasure. This treasure had to be brought out, and Venkatesh Rangan has helped us to unravel this treasure. I read the whole book. We had an interactive review program and it went on very well that day. Then suddenly there was this, hey, there's this eureka moment that came to my mind. Well, Venkatesh Rangan says that it was the first republic that was created. I remember reading this book on France where it talks about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, several republics. Why can't India also have been a republic earlier? Was the contention of Venkatesh Rangan. And it was true. So I just sent a message to him. Can you please reconfirm the date? And he did instantly. And thereafter I called him and I asked him if it would be appropriate to call the 30th of January 1774 as the day of the declaration of the first republic in India, a pan-Indian republic. There could have been the republics in the Chola Empire, the Lichavi Kingdom. Many tiny republics always did exist in India. India was known for very good public representation and gender equity. So what kind of a republic did exist then? So Venkatesh Rangan sent me a detailed note again on the republic, which was very interesting. Then I had a discussion with a few friends in Coimbatore along with Mr. Venkatesh Rangan. And I asked him, could we dare to declare this as one such day, which is an additional day in history? Here we are not erasing anything. We are only adding. A wealth is added and not something which comes out of destroying something else. And that is the nature of the Indian civilization and society. It has always been inclusive. So if we are really inclusive enough, we should add this date to our list of important days. Is the contention of all of us, which includes Mr. Venkatesh Rangan and myself. So there were these 12 people who were responsible for the creation of this Karbari Sarkar. And I also got to understand the importance of a great warrior. That warrior was none other than Mahadji Scindia. I was always of the impression that Peshwa Bajirao was perhaps the greatest warrior in 18th century India. I think we can add Mahadji Scindia to that list. And Peshwa Bajirao, if around today, would feel very proud of Mahadji Scindia for having hoisted the flag in Delhi. So Mahadji Scindia, I think, went through a series of campaigns while we had this Nana Fadnavis or Nana Fadnis taking care of the executive work. And they were ably and morally supported by the most philanthropic and charitable Punya Shlok Devi Ahilyabai Holkar, the ruler of Indore and the Holkar kingdom. She was responsible for the revival of the Maheshwari saris. She did everything for the sake of the country, nothing for herself. She lived in between 1725 and 1795, and as a child had met the great Bajirao Peshwa in the year 1733. And it was at that moment that her father-in-law, Ballarao Holkar, had decided that this girl will be his daughter-in-law. And looking at the story of Nana Fadnavis, I think it is in his destiny to come out like a genie. The first time that he came out was in 1761, after the Third Battle of Panipat, and the Marathas were defeated. Nana Fadnavis had to undergo a lot of difficulties. In fact, he was lying down in the battlefield with some wounds, with blood splattered all around him, and these Durrani soldiers were robbing the corpses of whatever could be found. And from there, he goes to one place, another place. He's lost members of his family, which include his wife and his mother. And thereafter, he decides to just stay quiet. And it is here that he meets in one Shraddha ceremony, Taurale Madhavrao, the new, the Peshwa, heir apparent of the Peshwa, who advises him to come back to work. These families have been close to each other for a long time. and this gentleman comes back. He starts looking into accounts, this, that, and administration. And time goes by. He gains experience. And unfairly, he's been compared to Machiavelli. Nana Fadnavis did not put one person against the other or murder this person or that person or any of these evil things. He never did that. He was a nice man. For whom did he do? He did all this for his people, for his country, for the whole India. I was going through some information which talks about his village, the Vada which was constructed by him, and the Maneshwar temple which is there. It was all very interesting to find. See, a man at the age of 19 in 1761 felt that life was not worth living. But for the next 39 years, he had done much to bring up the country. See, the kingdom which was steered by Nana Fadnavis and his team of this Karbari Sarkar team of another 11 people managed to defeat the East India Company, Hyder Ali, Tipu Sultan, Nizam of Hyderabad, and also take over Delhi. All this they did within a span of 10 years. They had an independent judiciary headed by the great Ram Shastri, whose story we shall reserve for another day. Okay? He was one of the greatest Nyayadishas that India has ever produced. At least, this is not mythology. We are talking about history and facts. Venkatesh Rangan has gone through enormous information by going through all the documents connected with Madhavrao Peshwa, with Savai Madhavrao Peshwa, with Narayan Rao and Balaji Bajirao, and produced veritable qualified information. And it is this book which is now helping us to declare the first day of the Indian Republic, or the first Republic Day for India. And I think we are putting a additional stamp on history, and it is a very historic moment for all of us. I'm indeed fortunate to be part of this discussion where we are declaring the confirmation of the First Republic officially in front of everybody online. The Twitter handles have been busy through the day. A number of celebrity writers, authors, and opinion makers have all been putting their points, asking people to watch this program and asking them to look at everything connected with this First Republic. So, let us celebrate the First Republic today. And this celebration should continue, and hopefully, we should have a nice celebration sometime in the near future, probably the next year, in the place where this republic was declared, by having a nice float which goes around the town or city. That will be the greatest tribute that we can pay to Nana Fadnavis and his team. I now call upon the interesting young banker author who has given us the opportunity to discover this with ease and help us to declare this as the First Republic Day, to talk with all of us, share his views, and also deliberate. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Venkatesh Rangan.
Firstly, thank you, Rajesh. I would say firstly, I would appreciate that you have chosen to commemorate this forgotten but very important day in our history. Now, about 5 years ago, or even much earlier, when I used to be you read about our ancient republican tradition. In the Vedic period, we had the Ganrajyas, the Vedic Ganrajyas. Then we had the Vajjian Confederacy, over 2,600 years ago. Then after that, in the Gupta Empire, you had the Ashtakula Adishta Adhikarana. Again, the rural and the urban democratic councils. And the Chola Empire, obviously, Ur and the Sabhas. And multiple other democratic features. I think the erudite Dr. Nagaswamy has gone deep into all of that. But a big question used to haunt me. Okay. And that question used to be, what's the link between these ancient republican traditions and modern? So when I looked around me, the modern democratic, I would say, structure of India and the ancient traditions, and I would often question, in case, let's say the British had not ruled over us, let's say, just a thought, in case, let's say the British had not come, how would a democratic India, what would be the constitution of India? When we say that the Dharmic constitution of India, how would the constitution of India? And it's only when I started researching on this late 18th century and on the Maratha Empire, I discovered that this is not speculation. There actually is a live example where all these ancient traditions together, the Vedic Ganrajya, the Mahajana, Janapads and the Ganpads of the Mahajanapada period, the Gupta Empire, democratic republics, the Chola, all together were put together into one political construct, into a pan-Indian democracy or a democratic republic. And that was a Karbhari Sarkar. Now, I actually came, I would say, to know of this through actually a few English and French records. So I was actually studying a few English records. And in 1786, there is a from the Residency Papers in Pune, where a British officer writes that the system of government, the Marathas here, is very different. It's different to all other Asiatic governments. In fact, he says, I'm reminded of the English parliamentary government in many ways, in the sense that it is not dependent on people, it is a system. Now, around the same time, you find another English resident, in the papers, who writes that this is a very unique form of government in India. A person who is poor and who is kind of a nobody can rise to become a great minister overnight. He's saying this is not possible in Britain. We are Britain, we are an aristocratic society. So I got very interested. In the French papers, in V.G. Hatkar's very famous translation of several French diplomatic dispatches, the end Monsieur Montigny writes that, the way Nana Fadnavis and Marathas negotiate is very different, because for every small clause in a treaty, they have to put it to vote in a council of many. So all this, piqued my interest a lot. I said, why don't I go into the primary sources? So then I realized that there were about 14 Bakhars, Hakikats, Kefiyats, and Thelis, original 18th century works, which actually contained a lot of details, about how on 30th January 1774, this fantastic, I would say, a fantastic democratic government was declared. Nana Fadnavis, Haripant Phadke, Tramete, Sakaram Bapu Bokil, different, I would say, statesmen and leaders of a time got together. There was a council of 11 elected people, one a special invitee. They got together, signed and sealed on certain covenants. There was also a special constitutional covenant of judicial independence signed on May 1774. And they put together this government which was very progressive and at the same time had a pan-Indian vision. Now, what was the vision of this government? We fortunately also have a Bakhar of Balaji Ganesh, who actually wrote it in 1783. And this was commissioned by Nana Fadnavis himself. Very interestingly, the Balaji Ganesh Chitnis starts off with India's civilizational heritage. He starts off with the Mahabharata, with the great Kurukshetra war, and how Dharma was won under the guidance of the great God, Bhagwan Shri Krishna and the Pandavas. The empire of the Kurus was established. So he says the great concept of a Chakravarti was established, where the whole of Bharatvarsh should be unified. And then he says the other emperors came, like the great Samrat Vikramaditya, Shalivahan, the great Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. And all these different rulers sought to recreate that Chakravarti ideal. And then he says that the Peshwas came. The Peshwas fought the Daityas and Anavas and Adharma from Sarad or Kashmir right down to Rameshwar. And then came the Karbhari Sarkar. So it's very beautifully he puts in how the civilizational context for unity and the uniqueness of land and how that is preserved, or the natural evolution of this is this Ganrajya tradition. And then he continues. He then talked about a great victory. Now, very few people know this, that the British were defeated not once or twice, but 7 consecutive times by the Karbhari Sarkar. Ultimately, they had to sign a humility and withdraw from Delhi politics completely. And in the Battle of Verandah, an entire British force of about 6,000, including the Allies, a British force of about 3,500 or so, but the Allies, inclusive of it, 6,000, surrendered lock, stock, and barrel. This was perhaps the greatest surrender by any colonial power to an, I would say, non-European power in the 18th to the 19th century. So, with such amazing victories, then the Karbhari Sarkar actually officially took over the Mughal administration, December 1st, 1784, when the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam actually made a publication, and virtually every single lever of administration, whether it be finance, accounts, defense, in fact, even the emperor himself was taken over by the Karbhari Sarkar. So you can say it was a formal end of the Mughal Empire. The gates of Somnath, which were looted by Muhammad Ghazni, were brought back because of the initial Karbhari Sarkar. Several of our pilgrimage spots like Mathura and Vrindavan, which were actually desolate because of invaders, they were revived because of the investments of Shinde, Punyashlok Devi Ahilyabai Holkar, and Nana Fadnavis himself. Kashi Vishweshwar, Somnath, Gaya, Naimisharanya. So a lot of things we identify as linking to the great Sanatana Dharma tradition of India today perhaps not have existed if not for this great, I would say, renaissance, which started with the declaration of Swaraj by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, but culminated in this grand Ganraj, which was a Karbhari. So overall, if you ask me for my view, so 30th January, so to give a very, I would say, historical perspective, 30th January 1774 is when the revolution is. So this was an outcome of a revolution. The revolution first declared itself overtly in Purandar. There was a strategic fort near Pune, the mid-January 1774, on January 17th, 1774, and finally took over Pune and made a formal declaration of the administration on January 30th. So, and this is a very, I would say, important milestone, not only from a historical perspective, but also for us today. Today, we often ask that India is a civilizational state. What is the steps we need to take forward? What is our vision for the world? And you get a large part of that vision in the Karbhari Sarkar's own initiatives. And learning, for example, and if I may just pin a very small point at learning and then conclude. Great Shravana Ramana, which I go on emphasizing on, annual mega conference on Vedic learning. You had 50,000 Pandits coming from all over India, from Srinagar to Kanchipuram, assembling in Pune. And over that, in a very interesting, the ancient Gita tradition of India, they are evaluated. So just like in Takshashila, Nalanda, Kanchi, what is called Dwarpalaka tradition. Okay, so in Dwarpalaka tradition, a great scholar sits on the gates. He's a Dwarpalak. It's like an entry examination. You give an entry examination, you go inside. Then there's a next level of all the Shastris who then evaluate your knowledge. This unfortunately was destined multiple invasions because of the invasion of the Khiljis, Tughlaqs, Mughals, etc. This Ghatika tradition was revived in the Shravan Ramana. And the Karbharis like himself, imagine Nana was the leading statesman. Himself became a Dwarpalak. He himself sat in the gates and would evaluate the different Pandits. So you can imagine the level of commitment which even the leaders had to the revival of the ancient civilization, the ancient traditions of India. A very small example of that. And definitely there are many other, there are just so many details and wonderful details on this government. Police reforms, gender-sensitive police reforms in 1794, when it was really unheard of anywhere in the world. A petitioning mechanism. So, how do you keep in track of what is the popular mood? Like we have opinion polls today. So Nana Fadnavis reorganized the secretariat and used to have news writers who would file in different newsletters from various parts of the country saying what are the issues. Some of them critical to the government. There is from different kind of villages, tribal villages, what they call fishermen communities, testifying. This is the problems we face. Some of them accuse some of the higher officials, and certain action being taken on that. So you find a very responsive government coming in place. I also mentioned one of the outcomes of this. In 1793 to 1795, there was a massive climatic disaster called the El Nino Northern Oscillation. That is a huge failure of the monsoons. In fact, it is a once in a millennia climatic incident. Despite that, we find a complete lack of destitution or devastation in India at that period. Contrast this with the British period, in which even the smallest failures of rain would result in famines. Nearly 35 million Indians died because of famines in the British period. In the earlier Mughal period, during the time of Jahangir, a traveler mentions that a famine was so bad that he could see remains of human bodies from cooking pots. I mean, it was that person's exaggeration maybe, but you can see how bad the situation. Now compare that to the way proactively a massive climatic disaster was handled by the Karbhari Sarkar. So you get how a responsive democratic government, ancient dharmic traditions of India, actually could manage both the welfare aspect, the civilian aspect, and also the military aspect. I mean, they had a very strong sense of self-worth. I've given an example of a treaty with the Portuguese. A very interesting clause of a treaty of 1780 with the Portuguese is that the Karbhari Sarkar's navy will protect or secure the ships which come from Macau in China to the different Portuguese empire. So you can understand the sheer power in which the Karbhari Sarkar was held. The French for that matter, the highest civilian order of France at that period of time, which is the Order of St. Louis. This is much before the Legion of Honor was kind of introduced. But the Order of St. Louis was actually conferred by Louis XVI to Nana Fadnavis. And it was done specially to entice basically the great leader towards the French, which Nana Fadnavis didn't, because he had a very strong sense of national interest and he negotiated on terms with the French. So I would just conclude by saying that this day of 30th January is a day for us to not only remember the great achievements of our ancestors, but also to take a very hard look at on where we actually want to be going ahead. So
wonderful, wonderful, Venkatesh Rangan. I think you have encapsulated the gist from a huge pot of milk and converted it into ghee and given it to us. Milk is very easy to be destroyed or spoiled, but ghee can stay along for years. And India is a country which knows about the preservation of ghee while the rest of the world preserves alcohol. So it's very, I had the opportunity to go through this book and also read a lot about Maratha history before and after. In fact, we at the Verandah Club tried to write about Vishwas Rao and his uncle who lost their lives in the Battle of Panipat. And I had sent it to Rohit of Chennai. And he went through this material and he felt that I should, talk to Venkatesh, and I got the continuation. This helped us to, the historians have unfortunately called the period between 1772 and 1800 as a period of anarchy. They call it as a period of the Maratha Confederacy. I think that was a conspiration to call it a confederacy. There was no confederacy. It was a democratic republic. The confederacy, who was there? The Scindia of Gwalior, the Holkar of Indore, the Bhonsle of Nagpur, and the Gaikwad of Baroda were part of the confederacy. And they said that there was a diarchy or one monarchy at Satara and the other one at Kolhapur. And there was also Peshwa, and they were trying to adjust with each other, trying to share the spoils and everything else. And it was because of this anarchy that things went bad later. Here we see there were no spoils of war. The book tells us that Mahatma Scindia returns to Pune after a series of expeditions, and he makes a demand for 7 crores with regard to the expenses that he has borne and that he has borrowed. And the Karbhari Sarkar just did not sign the check. There was no sharing of any loot or anything. They went through the accounts, and there were points of disagreement, debate and discussion, and finally the issue was settled. It didn't mean like, Nana Fadnavis, where you scratch your back and I'll scratch mine. You let me rule the roost in Pune. You do whatever else that you want in the rest of the country. I'll give you money and let me be at peace. No, that was not there. Such an accommodation did not exist. They ran it absolutely professionally. Even with regard to one Kotwal story, the offender had to be finally punished. So this book is more than a novel, a veritable document and a must read for anybody who's interested in understanding the Republican nature of India. Now, going back to Dr. R. Nagaswamy, I had the opportunity to read.
Actually, I'm sorry, if I may just a very quick tidbit, if I may just give.
Yes,
You're talking about the
yes.
Maratha Confederacy. How unfortunately, by not, I would say, referring or reading to the original Indian side of the story, we make a lot of conclusions. For example, this whole notion of Maratha Confederacy. Now, you have a Bakhar called a Narayanji Bakhar, which in detail explicitly mentions the name of the 11, I would say, elected Karbharis. Now, it is surprising, despite the fact that you have such a, I would say, open and explicit statement, continue to hold the view of Confederacy. The Khardyancha actually mentions a high-level appeal and a constitution of a panchayat for judicial appeals at the highest level. So just to tell you that there's a very large amount of primary sources available out there. What I've researched, somebody told me there's like lakhs of daftar papers lying somewhere, many of them not deciphered. We need to do that. I think that is very important. I say one, I would say, if a positive outcome which comes out of us, more people get interested and actually start researching on these original material and come out with stories on the Sarkar. Yeah, I'm sorry for interjecting. Yeah.
No, not at all. I was just looking at this book called Uttaramerur by Dr. R. Nagaswamy.
Sure.
It talks about the Sundaravardharaja Perumal temple, a Lord Vishnu temple in Uttaramerur in northern Tamil Nadu or central Tamil Nadu, where the records reveal the nature of democracy which existed at the village level. What is this Uttaramerur? Swarnameru Dan was made by one of the kings, I think perhaps it was Nandivarma Pallava, where unless 1,000 learned scholars live in a village, you can't make a Swarnameru Dan. So there were 1,000 learned scholars in Uttaramerur. Therefore, he made a Swarnameru Dan, and the number of scholars who were counted were 1,230. And he goes off to explain as to who can be elected. A man has to have a house, no criminal record, and cannot contest beyond a certain number of times, has to demit office. If there is an inquiry, he has to demit office and clear himself and come back. And how would they take care of the desilting of the lake, desilting of the ponds? Who will take the soil and how will it be used for farming? How will they communicate with each other? What will be the regular rules of civic governance in that place? Everything is brought out in a very beautiful manner in the book by Dr. R. Nagaswamy. I was really stunned with that revelation. But that was only at a small village level. Uttaramerur is like a small place, very popular thanks to the Tamil movie by Visu, where he comes in as a marriage counselor, calling himself as Uttaramerur Naradar Naidu, where he tries to mend broken marriages and put people together. That's the only thing of Uttaramerur that I had ever heard of as a boy. Thanks to Nagaswamy, I saw that. And thanks to Venkatesh, that what was seen at a very tiny level has expanded itself into a very large thing. So this is something which could not have taken place overnight. This must have been part of the Indian narrative, part of the Indian opinion, always. And even here we find Sakaramba, I think, not being for part of the 12-member council, which is the Karbari executive. That probably must have been because he was not elected by a popular choice. And therefore, he was kept in as a special invitee. So out of the 12, one special invitee and 11 were permanent members. And that's very, very interesting. See, it shows that our country was interested in ensuring that wise and intelligent people were not left out by the elected representatives. That's the message here. See, when you look at that gentleman, even though he was not a popular choice, but his inputs were important. Therefore, the democratically elected Republican government made sure that he was a special invitee and kept him within the fold. and therefore administration was smooth, and it was looking at the last person, last mile delivery. That's what is very clear through the appeals, the absence of a famine, and everything else. Very, very interesting. I suppose like what Venkatesh has been trying to say or has already said, we should probably request people to conduct a deeper research, translation of all the records which are there and bring them to light. And that would be a great revelation, and it would also be a great tribute to begin a civic services or civic study institution or university in the name of Nana Fadnavis, run on Indian principles and helping people to learn politics and civic administration so that India would always continue to be a global leader in these matters. And that would be very interesting to looking at, and definitely looking at the life of Nana Fadnavis. The genie came out once in 1761 thanks to Peshwa Madhavrao, or the heir apparent. Today, once again, the undying spirit of Nana has made it possible to manifest itself in this book through Venkatesh Rangan and help us to declare this fantastic day in the presence of all our readers, all our audience, under the leadership of Gaurav Tripathi, the founder and chief executive of Vayam. It's been really gratifying. We have been doing a number of reviews, a number of author discussions, and every time that we do all this, people were calling things like, no, this is like you're only trying to pander to Indian civilization, Indian culture, Indian this, Indian that, or religion. But finally, when we look at all these people, all these authors are highly qualified, well educated, and they're full of research, logic, and reason. From the IIT to the IIM to XLRI to heading a gaming vertical in an international company, these authors are fabulous people. Some of them are working in PSU Navratnas, and some of them are publishers themselves. And this whole flock, I think, has together come to retrieve India and give it one more chance. And let us remember not to leave this chance out. We should catch it firmly and try to do something fruitful. And let us, dear friends, try to celebrate this event on a national scale the coming year in the best manner that can be done. There are, few more days that can be celebrated in 22 itself, and all of it is connected with the initiatives of Nana Fadnavis and the Karbari Sarkar. And once again, a big thanks to Venkatesh Rangan for being an active accomplice in this matter. So, we had the opportunity to invite Mr. Gaurav Tripathi to be our guest of honor. I'm quite keen and interested in, thanking him again. And I think Gaurav should also say a few words at this moment because he lives in Delhi. He's a very well-connected and well-meaning gentleman involved with a number of ventures. And the startup Vayam is also, an IA or a new initiative. It is helping us to decolonize social media. And this is very, very important. Let us hear a few words from Gaurav Tripathi, the founder of Vayam, with regard to the initiative today and how that we can move forth from here on. Gaurav, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rajesh, and it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here, and I can't explain it in words. My feelings when I came across the book and when Rajesh told me about you, Venkateshji, it's really these have been the topics which have been on. I can claim, not just in my mind, but minds of a lot of my peers, my friends, people around me. We have been just to find answers. That the history that we have been taught in schools. Yeah, we just have it can't be really. It can't be just a 2-paragraph summary of what all happened and did it really happen and what was there, really, right? And that is where we see that when we so I'm in Pune actually, and I've been to Nana Fadnavis ancestral place in Satara in Vai. And one of the things which I do, around Pune, always take my family, my son especially, to all the forts around, right? Because I want my son to know the history, and that is where we see that the history which is being passed upon generations in folklore. When we hear these tales, and when we see that what we have heard, what people who have been in those places for generations, what they talk about and what they are telling, somewhere it's not matching with the history that we have read. Right? Then at that level, that is where the feeling is, okay, we are missing something. So I'm really thankful to you, Venkatesh ji, to bring all of this in such a format that it can really reach millions, and it will really help an entire generation to know more about the people who have not just built a kingdom or an empire or a republic, those who have laid down their lives really to make sure our civilization survives and thrives. So that's all. I feel it's really. I think we all, from my side, I see to me that yes, one of the tasks that I have is to make sure this reaches as many people, and for us, that has been the simple reason why we came up with Vayam as well. And as Rajesh already thanked Chandni ji for the connect, but we see that through Vayam, we simply want to give a platform which has a character, which brings you closer to your culture, because this culture which binds this community, which binds our civilization, doesn't matter what language we are speaking, doesn't matter where we are in Bharat, but we all share a common culture, and that is where we see this novel initiative from Verandah Club to bring such people, such authors who are again spending so many years in the research and bringing out these facts and history to people. This is simply superb, and from our side, we are just doing whatever little we can as a team and as Vayam to help this initiative. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. And thank you, Venkatesh Rangan. What we should remember is today we have done a time stamping. To use the word from my colleague, Mr. Jagannathan, he called this time stamping today. And we put a stamp on this era, this period, this time on this person. And I think we are indeed truly blessed and will be remembered for this, for eternity, because sometimes when it starts in a small way, but when it becomes a larger event, a larger celebration, a larger declaration, they have to go back to the origin of this, and the time stamping has been done today. And I'm grateful to each one of you, and particularly Gaurav and Venkatesh, for giving me this opportunity to collaborate and work so that we have done an appropriate, suitable time stamping. People normally call all these things as rewriting of history. I would not say that. I think we are just putting everything in one place. There's no rewriting. We are not going to say that 26th January does not exist. It does exist. It cannot be changed, and it is there to stay. But we are also adding this first Republic Day and the day of the declaration of the first Republic in the history of India and in the history of human civilization. The first one of its kind, thanks to the great Indian statesman, the Bharatiya statesman, Nana Fadnavis, and his colleagues who included Mahatji Scindia, a host of others, and also the most noble, charitable, and moral Punyashlok Devi Ahilyabai Sholkar. I am indeed happy and grateful to God and to Bharat Mata for giving me this opportunity to participate in this event today. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, friends.
And
Thank you.
I would also like to congratulate both you and Gaurav, because I think it's very important that and yes, and both the Verandah Club and the Vayam app per se, because you are vehicle for this, I would say, the true history of India to come out. The true history of our, which we have known from our hearts, but somehow we have been told something else in our mind. But you're given that vehicle for which it's coming out, and I think perfect example of an Atmanirbhar app and the Verandah Club. I think Rajesh, what you're doing is a wonderful job. I think I would say it's a great service in itself, a great service to a nation, and everybody else in the Verandah Club. I think I even told this to Jagannath and others, and especially, what all of you are doing is I would say, a great initiative, and it'll definitely have its impact. It'll have how in the ocean, but as I say, drops make a large ocean. Har boon se ek sagar, and I'm sure this saga of the true history of India will.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gaurav ji. Thank you so much, Venkatesh ji. It was a marvelous evening to interact with all of you. Vande Mataram.
Vande Mataram. Thank you. Thank you, Venkatesh ji. Thank you, Rajesh ji.